Hi, class. I want to talk about best practices for the decision-making module. Let me start off with, let me say we had a programming glitch at the beginning of the week, and I'd like to thank all of you for feedback you sent to me. Um, and I also would like to give recognition to Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. He sent some key feedback that helped fix the problem, and so I really appreciate that. It was very helpful, so thank you again for all that feedback. Best practices this week, I'd like to start with this. This is Mitchell from Group 2. Nice job, Mitchell. You can see how he's used the format well in response to the behavioral interview question, same way in response to the challenge. He's got everything outlined pretty good here. He's got his exam question and completed all parts. So nice job for Mitchell. I'd also, this is Megan from Group 3. Nice job, Megan. You can see how she's made it really easy to follow her response. She did the same thing with diet in response to the challenge. So it's all formatted really nice. So good job, Megan. I also, so I've got Paula here from Group 4. Nice job, Paula. Same way she spelled the words out, but it's really easy to follow. They're in bold. Same way with diet, how she has it really well marked. So nice job, Paula. Those are our best practice examples. One of the questions this week was to evaluate your group discussion, and it was pretty interesting reading it. I'll be honest with you, I'm really surprised just how well all the groups were rated. The responses all ranged between 7 and 10, with the exception of one outlier response. And matter of fact, Group 2, Group 4, and Group 7, all the responses were between 8 and 10. So that was pretty favorable feedback that you seem to be satisfied with discussions that are taking place within your group. There were a lot of meaningful suggestions for improvement and ways to elevate the discussions or add depth to the discussions. So that might be something you want to pay attention to. There were a lot of good comments in that. So anyway, thank you for making comments on the group discussions and providing the ratings. Probably the most common important term or concept that I saw identified as groupthink seems to come up a lot. And the classic textbook example, which we have in our text here, is the Bay of Pigs, which happened during the Kennedy administration, which was really a long time ago. It was important because basically the coercion was used to overpower two generals who said it would not be a good idea to attack Cuba. And yet we did attack Cuba, and it came close to starting a world nuclear war. More recent examples, some of you still not old enough to have experienced, but we had the Challenger example with NASA in 1986, and what that was, there were engineers at NASA saying that the O-rings could be faulty with the spaceship given certain weather conditions, and basically they were overpowered and with the notion that the general public expected NASA to launch. They didn't want to disappoint the general public. Now, what made this especially bad was that in schools all over the United States, teachers brought televisions into the schoolroom so students can watch the launch, because a school teacher was being launched into outer space for the very first time on the Challenger. And then, of course, we all know the results. It was like something like 73 seconds in, Challenger exploded due to the O-ring problem, and that traumatized a lot of kids all over the country who were watching this live. So that's certainly a memorable event for a lot of people. More recent was the spaceship Columbia in 2003, in very similar circumstance. There were engineers saying that there could be some faulty heat shields, and they basically were overpowered, and the launch took place, and the mission was successful until re-entry. And then in re-entry, some of the heat shields had fallen off, and Columbia overheated and kind of disintegrated over the state of Texas. By the way, in both the Challenger and the Columbia, there were 7 astronauts that lost their lives in those incidents. So typically when groupthink takes place at the government level, it usually results in some type of disaster. And so those are the primary examples. Now, what should you do? If you're in a group or a team and there's a dissenting opinion, you should check it out. You should research it. Now, in most organizations, that's easy to do. Whatever the dissension is, you can go to the source within the organization and verify it. You can either observe, what's being said, or interview people and find out. In other words, you explore the dissenting decision, and you consider it. Now, I've ran a lot of team activities in training with workers, and one of the things I've noticed, and one thing that we used to do, we used to run a kind of a friendly competition where we could quantify teamwork, and then the team that scored the highest would win. And so it was kind of fun to make it a competition. And we used to run an exercise called Lost in the Desert. And I remember one time doing this, and the person who had the best score in the room was on a team that lost. And the reason was that they kind of used great groupthink on this person, that he had a dissenting opinion. They didn't agree, and he, being a team player, went along with the group. So when I was debriefing the team, I asked this individual who had the best score in the room, I said, why was your score so good? Why do you think you scored that well? And he answered, this was Lost in the Desert, and he answered he'd been an airborne ranger in a Desert Storm. So this guy was trained in the military to be an expert in the desert, and no one in his team asked him what the basis was for his dissension. And I see examples like that all the time. I did this one time in a group of 100 people, and same exercise, and there was a woman in the room, had the best score in the room. Her team lost, and I asked her, I said, well, why was your score so good? She said, well, her family had rented the movie, The Flight of the Phoenix, the weekend before we ran this training, and it was about an airplane wreck in the desert. So it was about desert survival, and so it was fresh in her mind, and she had all the right answers, but no one in her team asked her what the basis was for her dissension. So that's the way you avoid groupthink, is that you take dissension serious and check it out. So I hope you enjoyed this module. It looks like from your comments a lot of you did. And we're now into motivation, and motivation is also one of the popular modules, so I hope you enjoyed as well. Thanks.